Close this. So some queen. I don't know. I just wanted to do another stream. Let's see this video.
Music is great, except
Looks cool. I wanted to see this.
when it's not. Video games are also great, except when they're not. And when you put the two together, sometimes something beautiful happens. Rhythm games have been a genre of video game for nearly 30 years now. Sometimes they're filled with great original music. Sometimes they're introductions into previously existing musical genres. And sometimes you play with a giant washing machine. So let's take a look at the birth, the rise, the very big rise, the very sharp fall, and the continued existence of rhythm games.
The games at Japan, you know, all those rhythm games. The washing machine. Yeah, I wanted to.
そんなお店がなくなってしまうのは本当に悲しいかなと思う。
How do you call this machines? And this is the washing machine. It's pretty ridiculous.
The birth of rhythm games can be traced back to Japan in the 1980s, and there are two progenitors of the genre we can point to. The first, according to Wikipedia, was an electromechanical arcade game distributed by Casco and designed by Kenzu Furukawa. I wish I could show you gameplay or even photos, but I genuinely could not find anything about it outside of Wikipedia and the article it cites. Furukawa's idea was a game where you'd lift girls' skirts in time to the rhythm.
Those guys. That's not cool, bro. Like, of course this is what they do. So pedo. So pedo. Like a pedophile.
There was also Dance Aerobics on the NES. It came with this plastic mat that you would stand on and press these buttons in time to the gameplay. Certainly a precursor, though it's framed more as a fitness game rather than a proper rhythm game. But the real birth of the genre was in 1996, with what many consider to be the first proper rhythm game ever made.
Awesome. Yeah, for the PS1.
This is Parappa the Rapper for the PlayStation 1. The game is about a child dog who wants to woo a flower. His best friend
I didn't actually play this game. I think my first proper rhythm game was like a Flash games or something. I'm trying to think, maybe. No.
Is a bear, and his arch nemesis is a big chin dog with a sick ride.
The maximum speed is tuned up to 463,200.
But in order to get the sunflower of his dreams, Parappa must learn the ways of karate, motor vehicles, bargaining, bakery, and bowel movements. The 5 stages of grief. Once he is victorious, he sings a big song centered around his catchphrase, "I gotta believe!" And his posse celebrates by going to the movies and sitting down right when the movie ends. Yes. It's a simple plot, something straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon. On that same note, the game's art direction was led by artist Rodney Greenblatt. The whole thing has this paper book aesthetic with 2-dimensional characters.
Yeah, it's like sprite based, but it's in a 3-dimensional render, and then they can move the 2-dimensional. It looks like a paper, like Super Mario. Like Paper Mario.
The game's music, on the other hand, was done by Masaya Matsura, an active musician in the 1980s J-pop scene. In the late 90s, though, he got involved with composing music for games, and his most famous work was with the Parappa series. If you're an epic gamer from the 90s, you probably already know the opening level's song, Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap. It's a great first level where the game teaches you how it works. The master will rap a line, Then you mimic it back using the same button presses. If you don't repeat the line well enough, the track starts breaking down with squeaks and squawks until you just fail the level. But if you add your own little something something in a way the game likes, then you ascend into cool territory.
So essentially, like Cyborg says, but you can also add to it if you're on bait or something.
Where you freestyle for as long as you can. Though as a kid, I found that the way the game likes is mashing buttons like a lunatic. Oh, and if you were on TikTok in 2021, then you know the game from this.
Alright, we're here, just sitting in the car. I want you to show me if you can get far. Step on the gas.
Step on the gas?
Step on the brakes.
Both of these songs are great, and Prince Flea Swallow exists, but my favorite has always been Cheap Cheap the Cooking
great.
Chicken's rap. There's something about that chill sax.
I need to play this maybe someday. Give it a try. I like reading
line that soothes me so.
The other day, I was called a little turkey, but I'm a chicken, got it? Your beef jerky?
Parappa the Rapper is a certified classic, and a great kickoff to an entire genre.
It's all yours. Ah, this is life.
Now that a young dog had changed the rap game, the video game industry started toying with this newfangled thing called music. The biggest developer in the genre at this time was Konami, developer of many classic games, and their pachinko machines. The first title by their games and music division was 1997's Beat Mania in arcades. This game was inspired by DJs and nightclubs, and in turn, it's controlled with a big old DJ turntable. It was a huge hit in arcades, and it inspired Konami to change the studio's name to B-Mani. The series has been basically locked to Japan ever since, but a few games in the series have made their way to the US, such as a PS2 edition in 2006. There was also Guitar Freaks in...
It's the really old one, right? The really classic one. This. No. No. This one. Right? But be free. No.
1999, though these days it's called Guitadora. It's the same style as Beatmania, but instead of a DJ turntable, you use a guitar controller.
That's the original Guitar Hero.
Or if hitting things with sticks was more your speed, there was always Drum Mania. Weirdly enough, both series were essentially non-existent in the US, aside from one game in 2007. Apparently, developers and arcade owners in the States didn't see much potential in a game with a guitar-shaped or drum-shaped controller. But what if you didn't want instruments? What if you wanted to pound buttons with your hands? Poppin' Music in 1998 had you covered. Same idea as the two games before, but you hit these big colorful buttons. Plus, the game has a very family-friendly art style. This game looks so easy! This game looks so easy! But without a doubt,
this crazy Japanese player.
Konami's most significant rhythm game was 1998's Dance Dance Revolution. Again, you're hitting buttons in time with the rhythm of a song, but DDR had a dance stage with 4 big arrows. DDR became an utter phenomenon when it released in Japanese arcades, and it inspired a...
I even had like this mattress for the PS2. My sister used to play it, but it's so bad. It was unresponsive, it was hard to play with it, but we still tried. I sucked at DDR actually. I wonder, I need to try it one time on a physical machine that the buttons are pressable and not this fucking mattress, you know, with sensors. I think it's better to play. It should be fun.
PS1 port in 1999. That same year saw the first DDR arcade cabinet come to the States, but the PS1 game wouldn't release here until 2001. Now this is where we see a really fun game of supply and demand play out. Prior to the US cabinet's release, arcades had to illegally import Japanese cabinets. Once there was an arcade cabinet in the States, all well and good. But what if there wasn't an arcade near you and you wanted that PS1 game? And let's say you got it somehow. How would you get the pad? What, are you just going to play with the regular controller like a Satanist? Well, around this time, one company started filling that niche with their own DDR pads. That company was Red Octane. and in a few years, they became a game publisher as they brought a similar dance game called In the Groove from arcades to consoles. Good on them for capitalizing on the market. Maybe we'll see them again sometime.
That's probably the fucking mattress I talked about. It was pretty shitty.
I'm soon. But aside from Konami, what else was happening in the space? Well, let me ask you a question. When you saw footage of Parappa the Rapper, did you look at it and say, this game would be so much more fun if I played as the guitarist of the band fronted by side character Katie Can? Jammer Lammy. Lammy's got the same art style and gameplay as Parappa, but instead of a dog that raps, you're a sheep that shreds. The songs this time are good, though I wouldn't say any are better than Parappa's. Though what's neat is, once you beat the game, you unlock another playthrough with Parappa, and the songs change to match his style. I like the one where you nurse babies in a psychedelic hellscape, or help a pilot with multiple personalities fly the most flexible plane ever made. But for my money, the best piece of music from this game is its opening title music. God, I love it. Now let me ask you another question. When you saw footage of Parappa the Rapper earlier, did you look at it and say to yourself, this game would be so much more fun if I played as a wireframe rabbit who was separate from the Parappa universe entirely? Vib Ribbon. This was released by the same company as Parappa and Lammy, and once again you're hitting buttons in time with visual prompts, but this time you're a rabbit going on its evening stroll. Cute idea, cute art style, cute game. It's at this point that I want to classify the rhythm games we've been getting, and in my mind there's two types: real-time and call and response. To illustrate my point, I'll mention two games that came out in 1999 for the Sega Dreamcast. The first game
Dreamcast 2
is Samba de Amigo. The game came with two maraca controllers, and you played by shaking them at different elevations, high, low, or mid. This is what I consider a real-time rhythm game.
This is where this monkey character is from. That you play. I remember him from the Sonic Kart Racer game. He had a cool stage.
In that you are performing the song that is being played. Yes, you are the monkey performing a techno remix of Chumbawamba's Top Thumping. This is where your life choices led you. The second game is Space Channel 5. In this one,
this is the one with Michael Jackson.
You play as Ulala, a space journalist who has to report on an alien invasion while also fighting in it. Journalism school does not prepare you for this. Each level has you battling some enemy.
He has to mention Michael Jackson.
They perform a series of movements or actions, and then you repeat what they do. It's the same style as Parappa. Even to this day, when you're playing a rhythm game, there's a high likelihood that it falls under one of these two categories. And you could make the claim that call and response games have a bit of a real-time element. Like, yeah, even when you're repeating a pattern, you're still pressing the buttons in real time. But my point is, it's the framing that's different. Anyway, it's the year 2000. Video games were rapidly advancing in scope and scale. There was Donald Duck going quackers, and no other examples. The next big developments in rhythm games wouldn't be seen until 2001, though.
I think maybe I can maybe give more camera space here. Can be bigger.
Taiko no Tatsujin was released in Japanese arcades that year. The peripheral this time is a taiko drum. You hit either the center or the rim of the drum based on the color of the note. The series would eventually come stateside with a PS2 release.
I know this one from Otsu. I played a lot of Otsu back in the day. Like 2 years ago. Not back in the day. But I played Otsu.
In 2004, it features many American tunes that use the taiko drum, such as Goo Goo Dolls Slide, and the Jimmy Neutron theme song, and
Attack on Titan.
Since then, it's seen a number of releases, both in arcades and home consoles. There was also a PS2 title developed by Ines. You play as a young boy named U1 who gets the last Gitaru from his talking dog. The instrument then turns him into Gitaru Man, a legendary hero with the power to stand in one place and lean in the direction of the control stick. This game
I like this idea.
The game is more structurally involved than other rhythm games. Each song is framed as a battle between you and some villain. You start with the charge phase, where you gain health, then alternate between attack and defend, where you attack and defend. This has some great music in it, but for my money, the best song is the legendary theme. Just listen to this. I didn't want to cut any of that.
I like that. It's nice. That's super cute. I also like the sounds of like the sea and the fire and the background. It makes you feel like you're there.
God, the melody is so good. We got a sequel to Parappa the Rapper on the PlayStation 2, updated graphics, more modes, new tunes, noodles.
Noodles again?
I cannot tell you how many times I played and replayed the first Burger song.
Burgers, burgers.
You better get in line. Now put it on the tray. Is it for here or to go? Any which way it is good to know.
Or the third song with the ant.
What's this? A trick with a twist. Somebody do something, call somebody and make it quick. I'm sorry, I lied. Just wanted to guide everybody through this and go with a ride.
And finally, for 2001, we got Frequency, the first.
Oh yeah, Blood of Diablo. Let's do just chatting. Let's do not gameplay, not Nightmare, not Diablo. Let's do YouTube. React. Okay,
first major game by Boston-based studio Harmonix. Initially, Harmonix was not a game studio. Its founders were both graduates fresh out of MIT, and they wanted to create technology that would allow anyone to make music regardless of their skill level. Their first project was the Axe.
To create.
Their next project was Frequency, an exclusive to the PS2. It was pitched to Microsoft for the Xbox, but their VP of game publishing said a rhythm game would never succeed without some kind of peripheral. In this game, you play as a spaceship going down a tunnel with different lanes. Each lane corresponds to a different part of the mix of a song, and by hitting the notes, you create said part. If you get all the notes right in a certain section, the part plays automatically, so then you can hop between lanes to keep the full song going.
That's super cool. That's super cool. This sounds super interesting. That's a cool game idea.
A very abstract concept for a video game, but it also just clicks as soon as you get into the zone with it. Certainly helps that it came with a pretty eclectic soundtrack of electro dance. Critical reception was quite good when it released, but sales were not at the same level. In an oral history, Harmonix co-founder Alex Rogopoulos recalled how Sony's playtest results showed, quote, the pre-play interest score was the lowest score that they had ever received for any game they had taken to test, and that their post-play intent to purchase score was the highest of any game they had taken to test. Which sounds like great news until you realize, oh, that means no one is interested in picking up the game. Sure, they'll love it if they get their hands on it, but if they don't feel compelled to buy the game in the first place, somehow.
What after you got it? Yeah, I understand that. But that's true for a lot of games, right? So this is why a lot of games are free to play now.
Sony commissioned Harmonix for a sequel to Frequency, 2003's Amplitude. It boasts cleaner graphics, new modes, and a soundtrack that has names that I actually recognize, like Weezer and David Bowie. Sales were a teeny bit better than Frequency's, but not by much. But both games in what I call the characteristics of a Soundwave series got the attention of Konami, who brought in Harmonix to develop Karaoke Revolution. This one was way more successful than Frequency and Amplitude, and I think the reason why is because of how easy it is to describe. If you tried to explain Frequency and Amplitude to someone on the street, you'd be pepper sprayed within an inch of your life. Karaoke Revolution? It's karaoke on your home console. That's it. Since this game used a ton of
It's just karaoke.
popular songs, and getting master recordings was outside the budget this time, Harmonix brought in wave group sound to record covers.
That's like the rock band stuff, right? They also recovered some of the stuff.
Karaoke Revolution was a success, and it inspired several sequels in the coming years, including Get Away From Me. But I don't want to be a spaceship or a karaoke. I want to be loud and damage my hands.
I actually watched some Glee. I don't want to talk about it.
Thank you! Donkey Konga was developed by the team behind Taiko Drum Master and published by Nintendo in the US in 2004. It's very similar in style to the Taiko series, but instead of hitting one drum, you hit two. The DK Bongos. You play this game by hitting the left bongo, the right
I think everybody knows about
bongo,
DK bongos.
both at the same time, or clapping. It's a fun time, and it's bolstered by some popular hits and Nintendo tunes. What's your favorite Nintendo song? Let's say our favorites on 3. 1, 2, 3, Mozart's Turkish March. But you might not get to actually hear all of those songs because man, were these things loud. When I was a kid, there were 2 things my dad hated when it came to me playing video games. One was the music of Beautiful Joe. And
I love Beautiful Joe. What? Its music is very good. What do you mean?
Was the sound of the DK bongos. Not to mention, all that slapping and clapping started to wear on your hands after like an hour. Still, fun game, and it even got 2 sequels. Weirdly enough...
Well, I can understand that. My dad... I had like this annoying piano, this very annoying piano for children, you know, the plastic piano, and it made those very high notes. And I was playing that, and my dad was super mad about it. He threw it out the window because it was so annoying. I remember that clearly. I was like playing it. Ding, 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 ding. So annoying.
The longest lasting impact of these damn things wasn't them specifically,
how his dad was super mad about
but the studio who looked at them and said, 2D platformer. They made a 2D platformer with the bongos called Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and it's one of the best games Nintendo made that decade. You play as Donkey Kong bouncing around these levels trying to get your combo and score up. Then you end each group of levels in a boss fight, and some of them are duels against other Kongs. You evade their swings, and then you go... This is exactly how it works in nature. Anyway, the studio who made this went on to make some of the best Mario games ever. Speaking of Mario...
What the fuck is that? This D2R Mario?
Now I know what you're thinking. Michael, this is a mod. Like how they modded Mario into NBA Street and SSX.
It's true.
But I hate to be the one to break this to you. No.
What?
Those were real things in real games, and this is a real DDR game where Mario dance battles Waluigi. DDR Mario Mix was released in real you. No. Those were
Wait, they have Mario in SSX?
real things in real games, and this is a real DDR game where Mario dance battles Waluigi. DDR Mario Mix was released in 2005, but somehow that wasn't the biggest rhythm game of the year, because I
wanna play a bit. I would put him like on the background. No. This is not what I meant. I just wanna do...
Harmonix was back on the scene with a new partner and a new series. Let's set the stage for this. Harmonix was fresh off 3 rhythm games. One sold well, but the other 2 did not. They also made a hoverboard racing game for the PS2 iToy, but that doesn't matter right now. Things were not looking good for Harmonix, as the 2 founders even considered shutting the place down. But that's when they got a call from Red Octane. Red Octane and Harmonix were already familiar with each other. Red Octane had even pitched Harmonix on a custom peripheral for Frequency, but Red Octane came to Harmonix and said something to the effect of, hey, there's this guitar arcade game in Japan that's a huge deal. We know how to make peripherals, you know how to make rhythm games, let's do something. They realized they had a lot working against them. A few examples: peripheral-based games had never sold well in the US, rhythm games had never sold well in the US, Red Octane hadn't published many games, Harmonix was known for games that sold poorly, the game would come as a bundle with the guitar controller, which meant it would not only be more expensive than other games, but it would take up more space on shelves. But even with all that against them, plus a budget of only one sold D2R Mario Mix was Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and it's one of the best games Nintendo made that group of some of the best. Michael SSX still things in DDR Mario Mix was released in 2005, but somehow that wasn't the biggest rhythm game of the year, because Harmonix was back on the scene with a new partner and a new series. Let's set the stage for this. Harmonix was fresh off 3 rhythm games. One sold well, but the other 2 did not. They also made a hoverboard racing game for the PS2 iToy, but that doesn't matter right now. Things were not looking good for Harmonix, as the 2 founders even considered shutting the place down. But that's when they got a call from Red Octane. Red Octane and Harmonix were already familiar with each other. Red Octane had even pitched Harmonix on a custom peripheral for Frequency. But Red Octane came to Harmonix and said something to the effect of, "Hey, there's this guitar arcade game in Japan that's a huge deal. We know how to make peripherals, you know how to make rhythm games, let's do something." They realized they had a lot working against them. A few examples: peripheral-based games had never sold well in the US, rhythm games had never sold well in the US, Red Octane hadn't published many games sold well, as they had a lot working against them. You know how to make rhythm games in Japan, Harmonix, and said something to the effect of some peripheral for Frequency familiar with each other. Red Octane from Red considered, but that doesn't matter. He's down now. Did not. They all fresh off partner and a new series. Let's set the stage for this. Harmonix was fresh off 3 rhythm games. One sold well, but the other 2 did not. They also made a hoverboard racing game for the PS2 iToy, but that doesn't matter right now. Things were not looking good for Harmonix, as the 2 founders even considered shutting the place down. But that's when they got a call from Red Octane. Red Octane and Harmonix were already familiar with each other. Red Octane had even pitched Harmonix on a custom peripheral for Frequency. But Red Octane came to Harmonix and said something to the effect of, "Hey, there's this guitar arcade game in Japan that's a huge deal. We know how to make peripherals, you know how to make rhythm games, let's do something." They realized they had a lot working against them. A few examples: peripheral-based games had never sold well in the US, rhythm games had never sold well in the US, Red Octane hadn't published many games, Harmonix was known for games that sold poorly, the game would come as a bundle with the guitar controller, which meant it would not only be more expensive than other games, but it would take up more space on shelves. But even with all that against them, plus a budget of only $2 million and a deadline of the 2005 holiday season, they still pulled the trigger. On November 8th, 2005, we got Guitar Hero. So your virtual avatar is up on stage with your band, and your job is to play this thing damn well. Each button on the controller corresponds to a colored lane on the highway. Hit the button and strum the bar at the right time, you play the note. If you don't hit the notes, you'll eventually fail the song.
This sound, when you fail, this is so bad. I hated the sound. You fail. And when you also when you're like really playing the song and you feel it and you're on the beat and everything's going well, you screw up once, you hear this think, then you're like fuck, and you keep screwing up because it messes you up. Like you can pick it up and try to continue, but then the sound comes up and it messes you everything, the beat, it messes you up. The trick is to keep playing even when you mess up.
And then everybody up on stage is just standing there like, "Ah man, I'm all out of cash." If you play a specific section perfectly, you'll build up your star power meter. Once it's able to be activated, you tilt the controller to the heavens and score extra points for a limited time. Just like its Japanese forefather, Guitar Hero is a very fun game. Why did Guitar Hero take off in the US when Guitar Freaks did not? Well, isn't it obvious? The notes in Guitar Freaks go up, but in Guitar Hero, they go down. The initial recordings used while the game was being play tested were done by Guitar Hero. Very power meter. Once it's able to be activated, you tilt the controller to the heavens and score extra points for a limited time. Just like its Japanese forefather, Guitar Hero is a very fun game. Why did Guitar Hero take off in the...
Wait a minute. Let me... Okay, let me figure this out 1 second. What? The fuck is wrong with this fucking Bluetooth? Oh, it's Steam. It was Steam all along, I think. Right? This. Okay. Come on. And then it disconnected my Okay, now it should work. I don't know why it keeps disconnecting.
in the US when Guitar Freaks did not? Well, isn't it obvious? The notes in Guitar Freaks go up, but in Guitar Hero, they go down. The initial recordings used while the game was being play-tested were done by Harmonix, but when it came to the game proper, Harmonix and Red Octane brought back Wave Group sound to record covers. And it's a pretty good soundtrack that covers a lot of bases. Black Sabbath, Jimi Hendrix, Franz Ferdinand, David Bowie, Queen, Joan Jett, 47 main songs in total, plus 17 bonus songs, many of which were by bands featuring Harmonix members, and were master recordings. This is where I learned about the song Even Rats by the Slip, which is a favorite of mine to this day. Every part of the game oozes with songs Jimmy to record covers. The notes in Guitar Freaks go up, but in Guitar Hero, they go down. The initial recordings used while the game was being play-tested were done by Harmonix, but when it came to the game proper, Harmonix and Red Octane brought back Wave Group sound to record covers. And it's a pretty good soundtrack that covers a lot of bases. Black Sabbath, Jimi Hendrix, Franz Ferdinand, David Bowie, Queen, Joan Jett, 47 main songs in total, plus 17 bonus songs, many of which were by bands featuring Harmonix members, and were master recordings. This is where I learned about the song Even Rats by the Slip, which is a favorite of mine to this day. Every part of the game oozes with genuine love for music. It certainly helped that Harmonix was staffed to the brim with musicians. These were people who would work at Harmonix by day and then go across the street to TT the Bears, rest in peace, at night. Hell, the tips that show up on the loading screens aren't just tips for the game, they were meant to be tips for being a musician. Guitar Hero is a great game, an absolute labor of love from everyone involved. Even if this game went on to commercially fail, Harmonix and Red Octane could take pride in what they had made here.
The first game
But it's a good thing it earned $45 million by the end of 2005.
This is a bunch.
Guitar Hero took off immediately after its release. The contract between Harmonix and Red Octane allowed for one sequel and one side game, which they got to work on very soon after Guitar Hero 1. Before touching on those games though, I'd like to touch on the Nintendo DS's bottom screen. 2006 brought us Elite Beat Agents, a US adaptation of the 2005 Japanese DS game Osu Tatakai Wendan. Both games were developed by Inez, the studio who did Gitaru Man. You play as a group of 3 special agents who help people in dire situations by dancing to popular music. A taxi driver needs to get a pregnant woman to the hospital, cue up Avril Lavigne. A weather reporter needs to manifest a beautiful day for her son's birthday. Time to remember the...
The gameplay here looks like Osu, right? It's touchpad in the DS.
A weather reporter needs to manifest a beautiful day for her son's birthday. Time to remember the 21st night of September. An aging baseball player needs to rescue a young fan from the clutches of a primordial rock golem. This is the anthem. Throw all your hands up. Yeah. Still wanna be, yeah. Each difficulty level features a different leader. The hardest difficulty has you just playing as a trio of cheerleaders, and the final level on said difficulty destroyed my DS screen. I should have earned a degree in music performance just from beating that. This is one of my favorite rhythm games, for sure. If you have a method of playing it, I highly recommend doing so. There was also Electroplankton.
What? What?
In this game, you touch the fish, and the plants, and the directional arrows. It's a Smash Brothers stage now. But aside from those two twinkling stars, there was the ever-growing supernova that was Guitar Hero 2,
Where is
released
it
for
going?
PS2 in November 2006 and for Xbox 360 in April 2007. There is a reason for that gap, but I'll explain it later. The gameplay is functionally the same as Guitar Hero 1, but it's the little differences that make for an improved experience. New controllers, a practice mode, assorted quality of life changes. The 360 version goes a step further.
Wait a minute, I wanna try and fix this fucking... This is horrible. I can't play like this. I almost died because of the controller. No, it doesn't. Here we go. Allow. Succeeded. Okay. What the fuck? The fuck? What? Oh my god.
Hero 1, but it's the little differences that make for an improved experience. New controllers, a practice mode, assorted quality of life changes. The 360 version goes a step further with a unique controller, a restructured set list. But aside from those two twinkling stars, there was the ever-growing supernova that was Guitar Hero 2, released for PS2 in November 2006 and for Xbox 360 in April 2007. There is a reason for that gap, but I'll explain it later. The gameplay is functionally the same as Guitar Hero 1, but it's the little differences that make for an improved experience. New controllers, a practice mode, assorted quality of life changes. The 360 version goes a step further with a unique controller, a restructured set list, online leaderboards, 10 extra songs, and the ability to purchase more as DLC. The biggest difference is, of course, the soundtrack. The PS2 version rocked 40 main songs and 24 bonus tracks. The 360 version bumped those numbers up to 48 main songs, 26 bonus songs, and 24 DLC songs. Once again, Wave Group sound was brought in to record covers, but some songs came with their master recordings. Harmonix and Red Octane had difficulty getting music licenses for Guitar Hero 1 since they didn't really have a product to show. For the sequel, they not only had something to show, but something that was successful. This allowed the teams to not only get more recognizable songs, but also product placement from brands like Zildjian, Guitar Center, Orange Amps, Gibson, and others. Revisiting this game brought back so many memories for me, playing along with Wolfmother's Woman, Cheap Trick Surrender, Kansas's Carry On Wayward Son, Sweet Child of Mine, YYZ, Beast and the Harlot. They even did the meme and put Freebird in the game, and they ask you like 8 times if you actually want to do Freebird. And now, that one scene in Gossip Girl where Blake Lively played Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero 2 was an even bigger success than the first game, raking in $200 million in revenue by the end of 2006. But while the crowds were growing bigger than ever, behind the scenes, the band had already broken up. A few months prior, in May 2006, Red Octane was purchased by Activision for $99.9 million.
What? Wait, the controller is working now? No, it isn't. What? What is going on here? What? The set device allow, and then it disconnects. What? Connected. Oh, okay. This took forever.
And in September 2006, Harmonix was purchased by Viacom, or more specifically MTV Networks, for $175 million. Red Octane getting purchased first surprised me. Sure, they made the controller and they published the game, but Harmonix was the one who actually developed the game. Why did Activision go for Red Octane? Well, because they also owned the rights to the series. And the first thing Activision wanted to do was push the Guitar Hero IP beyond. MTV was put Freebird in the game, and they ask you like 8 times if you actually want to do Freebird. And now, that one scene in Gossip Girl where Blake Lively played Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero 2 was an even bigger success than the first game, raking in $200 million in revenue by the end of 2006. But while the crowds were growing bigger than ever, behind the scenes, the band had already broken up. A few months prior, in May 2006, Red Octane was purchased by Activision for $99.9 million. And in September 2006, Harmonix was purchased by Viacom, or more specifically MTV Networks, for $175 million. Red Octane getting purchased first surprised me. Sure, they made the controller and they published the game, but Harmonix was the one who actually developed the game. Why did Activision go for Red Octane?
I need this again.
For Harmonix for 90 months prior. Behind the scenes,
okay.
The band had already broken up.
I'm going back.
A few months prior, in May 2006, Red Octane was purchased by Activision for $99.9 million. And in September 2006, Harmonix was purchased by Viacom, or more specifically MTV Networks, for $175 million. Red Octane getting purchased first surprised me. Sure, they made the controller and they published the game, but Harmonix was the one who actually developed the game. Why did Activision go for Red Octane? Well, because they also owned the rights to the series. And the first thing Activision wanted to do was push the Guitar Hero IP beyond just the PS2. Hence, why a 360 version came out months later. But before these two parted ways, they came together for a nostalgia cash grab. Guitar Hero Encore Rocks the 80s was released in 2007, and it is the final Guitar Hero game developed by Harmonix. Truthfully, there's not a lot to say about it. It's Guitar Hero, but with a soundtrack made up exclusively of 80 songs. Red Octane had announced after Guitar Hero 2 that they were interested in doing games centered around one artist or one genre. There was a chance. Alas, critics were underwhelmed with the smaller setlist and the lack of any quality of life tweaks from Guitar Hero 2. On the other hand, though, it does have Because It's Midnight from Limousine.
Which game?
Between this and Trogdor and Guitar Hero 2, Alex Rogopoulos, you are a man of class and taste. The stage and
What?
Red Octane Guitar Hero these two the PS2. Well, because they also owned the rights to the series. And the first thing Activision wanted to do was push the Guitar Hero IP beyond just the PS2. Hence, why a 360 version came out months later. But before these two parted ways, they came together for a nostalgia cash grab. Guitar Hero Encore Rocks the 80s was released in 2007, and it is the final Guitar Hero game developed by Harmonix. Truthfully, there's not a lot to say about it. It's Guitar Hero, but with a soundtrack made up exclusively of 80 songs. Red Octane had announced after Guitar Hero 2 that they were interested in doing games centered around one artist or one genre. There was a chance. Alas, critics were underwhelmed with the smaller set list and the lack of any quality of life tweaks from Guitar Hero 2. On the other hand, though, it does have Because It's Midnight from Limousine.
I actually kinda liked Crazy Taxi, I'm not gonna lie.
Between this and Trogdor and Guitar Hero 2, Alex Rogopoulos, you are a man of class and taste. The stage was getting ready for a battle of the bands, but before that, I want to quickly mention jam sessions for the DS. It skirts the line between rhythm games and full-blown handheld guitar simulator. There are clips online of people playing shows with this game. It's also responsible for one of the best video game commercials ever made. Just look at this.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear.
Came out months later. But before these two parted ways, they came together for a nostalgia cash grab. Guitar Hero Encore Rocks the 80s was released in 2003. There's not a lot to say about it. It's Guitar Hero, but with a sound too that they were in. Alas, critics do. On the other hand, though, it does have 2. Alex Rogopoulos, you are a man of class and taste. The stage was getting ready for a battle of the bands, but before that, I want to quickly mention jam sessions for the DS. It skirts the line between rhythm games and full-blown handheld guitar simulator. There are clips online of people playing shows with this game. It's also responsible for one of the best video game commercials ever made. Just look at this.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Hudson.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! What the is this? F***ing sponge cake!
Key of Terror.
But enough of that. In late October 2007, we got Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock. This one was developed by Neversoft, the developer best known for the Tony Hawk skateboarding games. These are basically the same thing. It is effectively more Guitar Hero, but the biggest difference to me was in its presentation. Guitar Hero 3 really leaned into classic rock signifiers and decor, grandiose sets, larger-than-life caricatures, real rock stars like Tom Morello and Slash. And at the core of it all was a 73-song soundtrack, most of which were master recordings spread across a solo and co-op career mode. This game introduced me to some of my favorite songs at the time. The Strokes' Reptilia.
Guitar Hero 3 was really good. I remember playing it a lot. I really liked it. We had it for the Wii. It was a really good Guitar Hero. I think it was the best one actually.
Party's Helicopter.
You had these bosses and stuff that you play against them, against this guitarist, you know, from Rage Against the Machine, against Slash.
Pearl Jam's Even Flow, The Killers' When You Were Young, Eric Johnson's Cliffs of Dover. It very much is the nostalgia kicking in, but I think this is the series' best set list. Though I will say, it was also around this time that I noticed how the male lead singer can somehow do flawless imitations of Eddie Vedder, Kelly Okereke, Billy Corgan, Mick Jagger, and Jack Black. But of course, if you know this game, then there's one song you most likely remember for it. Once you beat the game,
Song Flame of Fire, right?
Solo career mode, you unlock it. Gaming has had several great challenges in its history. That one Battletoads level, Dark Souls, Cuphead. Guitar Hero's equivalent was playing Dragon Forces through the fire and flames on expert difficulty. A full-on cottage industry sprung up from this song.
This clip is so good. This is a classic clip. And I remember Fire and Flame plays at the end, right? What he's talking about. And then the credits roll and he's still playing along with the credits. It's because it's such a long song.
Viral videos of people 100%ing it. And when just beating it became passé, people would do it on 125% speed, or blindfolded, or with a toy guitar that is separate from Guitar Hero entirely. I will be honest, I tried doing this once as a kid, and I failed the song in about 5 seconds. I never attempted it again. That's okay. I'm okay with it. Guitar Hero 3 was a huge success. It was the first retail game to earn over $1 billion, according to Activision CEO in 2009. Guitar Hero was the king of the world.
Here comes a new challenger!
Just a week or so after Guitar Hero 3, we got Harmonix's new series, Rock Band. Have you ever been to a concert, seen the musicians on stage, and said to yourself, they got a hi-hat in on this? Rock Band's greatest innovation is right in the title.
They got a hi-hat on this?
Instead of just having guitar, you can now choose from 4 instruments: guitar, bass, vocals, and drums. This also meant you could have 4 people playing at once. This was Rock Band's biggest value prop, a great music-centric party experience. The other big value add to me personally was that the game just felt more modern. The branding of the series struck me as being so 2007. Plus, the new instruments, which came as part of a bundle with the game, looked clean and professional. The guitars especially, they look less like toys since the fret colors are well hidden. That modernity extended to the 45-song bass soundtrack. There was a little overlap with Guitar Hero 3, plus a number of rock classics unique to the game, but songs from the likes of OK Go and Fall Out Boy really just spoke to middle school me. Critical reception was quite high, as was a total revenue of $600 million by early October 2008. Though, interestingly, Viacom apparently didn't make a profit on the game due to the high cost of making the peripherals. Still, a huge cultural and critical success though. This was arguably the video game rivalry of the late 2000s. In one corner was Goliath, now with the backing of a multi-million-dollar company. In another corner was David, except David had previously developed Goliath and was also backed by a multi-million-dollar company. Regardless of which game you had, there was no denying rhythm games were the next big thing in gaming. So where do you go from here?
Oh no, not the motion.
Okay, listen.
Wii music was super shit, bro. I remember I played it with my brother. It was so ridiculous. We played it like one time, we tried it, every minigame. We saw how shit it is and never opened it again.
Listen! I'm gonna defend this game a bit. Wii Music was Nintendo's 2008 Wii branded effort to get in on the music game craze. And as far as efforts go, there was music and a game, I think? You can play along with the hottest songs by Nintendo in the public domain, you can play bells, you can conduct. The game's whole approach was to let you play songs how you wanted to play them. If you wanted to follow along with the real song, you could, but you could also just be yourself. People at the time did not like being themselves. But despite the negative critical reception, I like the idea of Wii Music. The freeform nature and the fact that there is no failure in this space. You can mess around as much as you want, and the game will still be like, this is the first step towards the rest of your life. It was a nice alternative to the growing emphasis in rhythm games on sheer technical mastery. And it was a reminder that music is supposed to be, like, fun. Man, I know for some people, learning a difficult track inside and out until you can play it blindfolded with your feet using a modded power glove is fun and rewarding. I just want there to be options on both ends of the spectrum. If you want to stun on people, go for it. If you want to do the Legend of Zelda theme with banjo, cheerleader, dog, and cat, then do that too. These are both valid. Also, the game's got a great main theme. Come on, how you gonna hate on that? 2008 also brought us Audio Surf. Ride your music. I've tried. There's 2 neat things about Audio Surf. First is how the gameplay works. You ride on these tracks, catching colored bars in 3 different columns. The goal is to line up bars of the same color close together for maximum points. The second neat thing is that you can play with any song in your computer's music library. The game auto-generates a track for every song, and from my own experience, The tracks are okay. They're fine. It's a fun game. If column type
The thing that you can choose your own songs, that's the big part I think of for this game. Even though I think it's not really like when you play the song, it's not really. It's obviously it's to the beat, but it's not really good. The tracks are not fun to play. You see that like it's not a human did it. Because it's
and
pretty
from
bad to
in
play
your computer's
some of the
maximum
songs.
points. The second neat thing is that you can play with any song in your computer's music library. The game auto-generates a track for every song, and from my own experience, the tracks are okay. They're fine. It's a fun
Said
game.
it's
If
okay.
column-type gameplay is your thing and you want it on your phone, may I introduce you to Tap Tap Revenge. It's the same idea as Guitar Hero, but with 3 columns to tap.
Tap Tap on the phone is really good. It's pretty fun.
I remember having this game on my original iPod Touch, along with Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D and Coldplay's Viva La Vida. Fun times. As another quick aside, I also want to mention Korg DS10. Like Jam Sessions, it's less a rhythm game and more an outright synthesizer made by Korg for the DS. I just think it's wild that they built this for a handheld game system.
If you're Metro, yeah, raindrops, drop top, smoking a hookah in the hot box.
But hey, we're still deep
That's pretty nice.
into Guitar Hero and Rock Band handheld game system.
If you're Metro, yeah, raindrops, drop top, smoking a hookah in the hot box.
But hey, we're still deep into Guitar Hero and Rock Band gripping the market. Though the companies involved were starting to run into a problem. Rhythm games were raking in a ton of revenue, and that is in part due to them being popular. But the other big reason is that you had to buy the instruments in order to get the full experience, which
You
was
had to
boosted.
buy it. I remember Guitar Hero 2. I played it with a controller. You had like, I had like, L2 was like green, L1 was red, like blue, R2 was blue. Yeah, like you had the color here, and then you played with the R2, L2 buttons, and X was the orange, the fifth one. So the fifth one was hard to press always. You know, it was kind of hard. But then I got the guitar because I really liked it. I played it a lot with the controller, and it's really to really experience it. You need the guitar actually, I think. Let's see. One second. Mm. Mm. Okay, never mind.
Boosting the amount a customer had to pay beyond the usual $50 or $60. So you buy Rock Band and you get all the necessary controllers. That's amazing. I'm so
It's right here, back. I'm in the Diablo 4? What? Notice. 1 second. Okay, whatever. What? I need more headspace here, right? But then when yeah, I don't need it. Let's fight it like that. Where was I?
so happy for you. But for any future games, you don't need to get the controllers anymore. A customer buys into the cult of Rock Band at $169.99, but any future game purchases would be capped at $50 or $60. So
Yeah, but you can't play. I remember you couldn't play Rocksmith games, Rock Band. You couldn't play Guitar Hero games with a Rock Band guitar, but you can play Rock Band games with Guitar Hero guitar.
So how do you counteract a guaranteed decline in revenue? Make a bunch of games! Quick aside, but hey, we're still deep into Guitar Hero and Rock Band gripping the market. Though the companies involved were starting to run into a problem. Rhythm games were raking in a ton of revenue, and that is in part due to them being popular. But the other big reason is that you had to buy the instruments in order to get the full experience, which was boosting the amount a customer had to pay beyond the usual $50 or $60. So you buy Rock Band and you get all the necessary controllers. That's amazing, I'm so happy for you. But for any future games, you don't need to get the controllers anymore. A customer buys into the cult of Rock Band at $169.99, but any future game purchases would be capped at $50 or $60. So how do you counteract a guaranteed decline in revenue? Make a bunch of games!
Right, for the DS one with the controller.
The great thing about this era is that I don't really need to get into explaining what every single game was, because most of them will just tell you what they are in the title. For example, the first Guitar Hero game of 2008 was Guitar Hero Aerosmith. It's Guitar Hero, but with Aerosmith, the first title in the series to focus on one specific band. Then we got Guitar Hero On Tour for the original DS and DS Lite. This game came with a guitar grip that plugged into the system's Game Boy Advance port. From there, yeah, it's Guitar Hero on the DS. You strum using the included pick stylus. There's only 4 fret buttons instead of 5. One day a doctor will diagnose me with arthritis entirely because I played this game as a kid. But other than that, it's Guitar Hero on the DS. We even got an On Tour sequel that same year with On Tour Decades. It's the same kind of game, but with a soundtrack based on decades, starting with modern songs and ending at the 1970s. Oh, and this year saw the continuation of Guitar Hero Mobile, which had released in December 2007. It's Guitar Hero on mobile phones. I'm talking like Motorola phones. But the main event this year was the release of both Rock Band 2 and Guitar Hero 4, subtitled World Tour. Rock Band 2 is Rock Band with more and made better. For starters, the game bundle came with improved controllers. It also added a drum trainer mode. They must have noticed the praise of the past game's drumming and said, hell yeah, we'll teach America's youth. A Battle of the Bands mode where you competed with other bands by uploading your best scores for songs. And of course, a new 84-song setlist. But as a bonus, if you had Rock Band 1, you could import most of the songs from 1 into 2 for a small price. One fun note about the soundtrack, Shackler's Revenge from Guns N' Roses' long-delayed Chinese Democracy was included, and it was the first sign that the album was finally releasing that same year. Could you imagine an album being teased in any other game? Wait, that's how you're announcing? So with Rock Band 2 raising the bar for rhythm games, how would the first Guitar Hero in a post-Rock Band world match it? By copying the bar outright. That's right, Guitar Hero World Tour added bass, vocals, and drums to simulate the full band experience. That meant new controllers for bass, vocals, and drums. In a very consumer-friendly move though, the peripherals for both games were compatible with other games. I imagine keeping them locked to their specific game would have only drawn out the bloodshed. While the new instruments are the biggest change, I also felt like this game had a more current soundtrack So with Rock Band 2 raising the bar for rhythm games, how would the first Guitar Hero in a post-Rock Band world match it? By copying the bar outright. That's right, Guitar Hero World Tour added bass, vocals, and drums to simulate the full band experience. That meant new controllers for bass, vocals, and drums. In a very consumer-friendly move though, the peripherals for both games were compatible with other games. I imagine keeping them locked to their specific game would have only drawn out the bloodshed. While the new instruments are the biggest change, I also felt like this game had a more current soundtrack when compared to the past 3 Guitar Hero games. Sure, you've got your typical rock classics, but you've also got Coldplay, Paramore, Blink-182, Interpol, Silversun pickups. Plus, for the first time, all of the songs were master recordings. Though, in case you're curious, Wave Group Sound did still work on any bonus or DLC tracks when they couldn't get the masters. There was a band tour mode that mimicked Rock Band's tour mode, though critics found Guitar Hero's band tour mode to be weaker than Rock Band's tour mode. You could also make your own tunes with the Music Studio and upload and share them via Guitar Hero Tunes. To be honest, I played this game a bunch as a kid, and I just found out that those features were in the game. But hey, no matter how much they added or altered, the simple act of getting friends together to make pretend music was still incredibly enjoyable. In fact, whether you got World Tour or Rock Band 2, you were gonna have a good time. Though now, what's the reason to get one over the other? You picked one because what, it had a specific song you liked, or you wanted a specific feature? I personally stayed on the Guitar Hero side because of brand recognition. This isn't a Rock Band household, it's a Rock Band household! Guitar Hero also happened to be the sales victor this time, selling 3.4 million copies through the end of 2008 versus Rock Band 2's 1.7 million. By this point, the two series were cultural touchstones. Celebrities were starring in ads doing the risky business dance, TV shows were parodying it, musicians were commenting on the games, or at the very least, the money they were making from their songs being in the games. More and more musicians were making like EA Sports and being in the game themselves, like Ozzy Osbourne, Sting, Hayley Williams, Travis Barker. But not every musician was thrilled about Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Jack White felt that video games weren't a good way to introduce music to new fans, while Prince, John Mayer, and Jimmy Page thought that it cheapened the act of actually learning the guitar. And sure, no one is gonna play Guitar Hero and then immediately become Steve Vai. But in my opinion, these games were a great gateway to finding a new favorite song or artist. Then that could get someone inspired to take up their instrument and learn how they did. And if World Tour and Rock Band 2 didn't convince people of that, the two series would get a lot more chances to do it. Guitar Hero Smash Hits was the first Guitar Hero game of 2009, a best-of compilation from the rest of the series. It's cool to hear all of these songs with their master recordings, since the first few games were mostly covers. Why was this a full-price game, though? Guitar Hero On Tour Modern Hits. It's Guitar Hero on tour, but with modern hits. You guys, I'm really trying here. Guitar Hero Metallica was Guitar Hero with Metallica. Its biggest gameplay innovation was a second kick pedal so that you could really feel like Lars Ulrich. It was also neat because Metallica's then upcoming album Death Magnetic was added as paid DLC not just to this game, but also Guitar Hero World Tour and Guitar Hero 3. This was a very nice gesture, but it also ties into something very funny. Okay, so if you know the record Death Magnetic, you might already know that it is infamous for being loud, very compressed. People wanted a way to listen to this album without feeling like a brick of sound was being shoved into their ears. And you know where they could do that? In Guitar Hero. The stems used for Guitar Hero did not have the same loudness issues. So somehow, buying the DLC and playing the tracks in-game was a better method of listening to Death Magnetic than actually listening to the album. Amazing. Death Magnetic was also available to play in Guitar Hero 5, which was released in September 2009. Once again, you could play one of 4 instruments, but this time you could make a band of any combination of instruments. Finally, what the people wanted, a bass quartet performing A-Punk. Plus, anyone could drop in and drop out during any part of a song. A great idea that made this even more suited for parties. The soundtrack was fine, though it went even more modern than World Tour. The game's project director, Brian Bright, noted that more than 50% of its 85-song soundtrack came from the past decade. If you weren't a fan of 5's soundtrack, though, you could import the majority of songs from World Tour for no extra cost, plus tracks from other games for a small fee. Guitar Hero 5 also featured a ton of cameos by musicians. Artists like Carlos Santana, Johnny Cash, Shirley Manson, and even Kurt Cobain.
What?
Which gets us to talking about a little issue this game had. So Kurt was an avatar in the game, purchasable through a character pack. You could have him sing Nirvana songs, but you could also have him sing not Nirvana songs. Some people found it in poor taste to have Kurt Cobain, a famously not alive person, singing YMCA or You Give Love a Bad Name. It doesn't help that some of those people were the the owners of Nirvana's estate. Guitar Hero 5 was pretty well received by critics, and it sold well, but less than 50% of Guitar Hero 4. But alas, that's not how the Guitar Hero series ended its 2009. Or rather, that's not how the Hero series ended its 2009. DJ Hero released a month later in October 2009. It boasted a new genre, electronic dance music, and a new turntable peripheral. History doesn't repeat, it just rhymes. This one was a great time. I got it for the Wii ages ago, and it's such a fun simulacrum of being a real DJ. The mixes were excellent. Marvin Gaye and Gorillaz, Queen and Daft Punk, Dizzy Rascal and Justice. It really bums me out that there's no official way to listen to most of these mixes. Despite its quality though, DJ Hero was the first real sign that something in the rhythm game kingdom was amiss. Most reports had the game selling under half of Activision's projections. Some time away from the series would do Activision some good. And as soon as I finish that sentence, look what we got. Band Hero came out in November 2000.
Yeah, wait, I have to show this to you to the story. Check this out, guys. I have this DJ Hero. This piece of shit. I have it for the Wii. This piece of shit. DJ Hero. No.
Listen to most of these mixes. Despite its quality though, DJ Hero was the first real sign that something in the rhythm game kingdom was amiss. Most reports had the game selling under half of Activision's projections. Some time away from the series would do Activision some good.
It's weird.
And as soon as I finish that sentence, look what we got. Band Hero came out in November 2009. It comes with a soundtrack filled with mainstream pop songs. We're talking Jesse McCartney, Janet Jackson, Taylor Swift, Corinne Bailey Rae, Maroon 5. Otherwise, it's Guitar Hero 5. I don't know, I guess this makes for a more accessible party game if more people are aware of the songs. And so, finally, the Hero series ended its 2009. Are you kidding me? Guitar Hero Van Halen released in December 2009.
I had it also.
It's Guitar Hero, but with Van Halen, even though some of its members are inexplicably missing. Speaking of missing, some features from Guitar Hero 5 weren't in this for some reason. It didn't review or sell that well. By comparison, the Rock Band series really kept it laid back this year. We got Rock Band Unplugged for the PSP. Don't worry, this one does not come with a Rock Band grip or anything. It's Rock Band, but in the style of Frequency or Amplitude. It's neat to see Harmonix combining a gameplay style that was well reviewed with a brand and soundtrack that would actually sell. There was no mainline numbered entry this year, though we did get something that was arguably even bigger.
This was good.
The Beatles Rock Band. MTV had already been talking with members of the Beatles family before Rock Band 1 even came out, and after years of talks, we got a full-on Beatles music game, which released alongside the 2009 remasters of all of their albums. This is the best band-specific game from either series, in my opinion, because, well, I'm biased as a fan, but it's got the most to work with. It covers the band's full history, it's got great visuals, new controllers made in homage to the Beatles instruments.
Like
the only real bummer is that, unlike other entries, the songs and avatars from this game couldn't be transferred to other Rock Band games. Apple Corps deprived us of seeing Paul McCartney sing Misery Business. Shockingly though, the Beatles Rock Band was also considered a sales disappointment. It launched the same month as Guitar Hero 5, and while it sold over 500,000 copies in the first month in the US, analysts had projected way more. If the Beatles can't save your genre, I don't know what else could. Oh, thank goodness! Finally, there was Lego Rock Band. This one boasts a very family-friendly soundtrack.
It's
the first game in the series to start choking hazards. 2009 did not just belong to the heavyweights, though. We also saw the debuts of 2 new series. Rhythm Heaven is another rhythm game on the DS, and it is my heaven. The gameplay is built around tapping, holding, or flicking the stylus, and the scenarios are wild. You punch flower pots and barrels, you ram dumplings down your throat, you see footage of me in high school choir. As far as I'm concerned, this is a rhythm game classic. But don't take my word for it, just ask Beyonce. Look, all I'm saying, here's a graph of the Metacritic ratings for each Beyonce album. And here's when she played Rhythm Heaven. 2009 also saw the first entry in the Just Dance series. It was a fleshed out version of a mini-game from Rayman Raving Rabbids TV Party where you dance to popular songs in sync with an avatar.
It started in Rayman Raving Rabbids?
Look, all I'm saying, here's a graph of the Metacritic ratings for each Beyonce album. And here's when she played Rhythm Heaven. 2009 also saw the first entry in the Just Dance series. It was a fleshed out version of a mini-game from Rayman Raving Rabbids TV Party where you dance to popular songs in sync with an avatar. It reviewed terribly, but oh god did it sell well. It also has lore. I don't have time to get into it, but I'm just letting you know for your own safety. 2010 was a much quieter year for both Guitar Hero and Rock Band. To start, we only got 2 hero games. Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock came out...
He said? Just that says lore?
A game from Rayman Raving Rabbids TV Party where you dance to popular songs in sync with an avatar. It reviewed terribly, but oh god did it sell well. It also has lore.
What? No way, bro.
I don't have time to get into it, but I'm just letting you know for your own safety. 2010 was a much quieter year for both Guitar Hero and Rock Band. To start, we only got 2 hero games. Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock came out in September. This one seemed to be an effort to refocus on the series' OG fans, with a return to the visual aesthetics of Guitar Hero 1 and 2. The story mode has you recruiting Warriors of Rock to defeat the Beast, and each warrior has a transformation that can help you in the game. The 93-song soundtrack also pivoted back hard to the classic rock, metal, and punk of the first games. Say what you will, but it's pretty neat to see the series go from Killer Queen cover in the first game to Bohemian Rhapsody master recording in this game. The 2 most noteworthy songs used were the full 2112 suite by Rush and a new song by Megadeth recorded specifically for this game. Even still, the rest of it was just Guitar Hero, and it sold/was reviewed as such. The second hero game was DJ Hero 2 in October 2010. Again, more DJ Hero, and it sold even worse than the first game. On the Rock Band side, there was Rock Band Green Day. It's Rock Band, but for Green Day. One analyst reported that it only sold 82,000 copies in the US within its release month. And then there was Rock Band 3 later in the year. It added keyboards as a playable instrument, and it featured a new Pro mode, meaning you could plug in certain real guitars and keyboards to get an even more accurate playing experience. The keyboard itself for the game is usable as a legit MIDI keyboard, which is pretty neat. Reviews were arguably the best the series had ever seen, but sales were not great. However, that same month, Harmonix also released something new, a bold take on a growing trend, and it all started with home surveillance. Dance Central released in late 2010. It was Harmonix's attempt to mash up Just Dance with the Xbox's new motion camera, the Kinect. I personally can't tell you how it was to play, as I did not have it, but it sold 2.5 million copies and was considered far and away the best Kinect launch title. Not that it had much competition. It spawned a few more sequels in the coming years, and that just about does it for Harmonix and Red Octane's torrential reign over gaming. Just to make sure you understand, that was 19 games. 19 games that were released under the Blank Hero or Rock Band umbrella that were released between 2008 and 2010. And when you consider that many of these games were being released back to back to back, it's pretty easy to see why the rhythm game craze turned into an overbearing fad. It's also worth noting that, aside from the deluge of rhythm games, the period between 2008 and 2010 is also famous for having a recession. Many people were cutting back on their spending. Some people couldn't afford a $50 or $60 game, let alone a game that costs nearly triple that. Heck, the UK Office for National Statistics used Guitar Hero and Rock Band as a measure of how consumer spending changed in that period. It says a lot when your game is being used as an economic metric for a recession. The nails in the coffin came throughout 2010. In December, Viacom sold Harmonix for a reported $50. Not 50 million, not 50,000, $50. Now that number comes with some caveats because Harmonix was still holding on to all of their debt and Viacom got to use the sale as a tax write-off, but as a symbol of where the rhythm game genre had gotten to, man, that's kinda sad. As for Red Octane, they were closed by Activision back in February 2010. Neversoft at least got to make some Call of Duty games before it too was shuttered in 2014. Oh, and Wave Group Sound is Facebook's in-house sound design team now. Now, the way this part of the story is unfolding, you might think that rhythm games as a whole died after this. And look, they certainly have not reached the same heights, that's obvious. But there have been quite a few games that have kept this genre going, if not innovating on it outright. And in 2015, no two examples shined brighter than Why Can I Not Escape You? Guitar Hero Live was released in 2015 and developed by Freestyle Games, the same people who made the two DJ Hero games. So what does this Guitar Hero bring to the table? Realism. First, there was a new controller. Instead of 5 single buttons, there were 6 buttons divided among 2 rows. Notes in the game were color-coded black or white, which denoted which row and button to press. Before you ask, yes, this meant the controller could not be used with past games, and old controllers could not be used with this game. Second, instead of the old avatars, the visuals were either full motion video or the song's music video.
I actually like the...
I don't know, the full motion video could be considered more immersive, and I could be biased by nostalgia, but there was a charm to the series' motion-captured avatars. Guitar Hero Live feels like I'm in a mediocre karaoke bar, but for guitarists. I mean, they're still using master recordings, right? But the vocalists who are singing in the game aren't the vocalists who actually sing the songs. What the hell did you do with Matty Healy, you assholes? The soundtrack this time had only 42 songs on the disc, and man did it lean on modern songs. Some artists like Arctic Monkeys and Jack White made perfect sense being here, but Rihanna? Imagine Dragons? Skrillex? There's also the matter of how the game added new songs. You see, you couldn't buy songs to play this time. Instead, you had Guitar Hero TV, a streaming service that allowed you to jump into songs that were on rotation. Imagine if you were watching MTV back in the day and you could just press a button to start playing along. Apparently, this made licensing rights a lot easier and cheaper to get. Cool. I'm just confused by this whole game. And other consumers were too. While Activision never revealed sales numbers, they did say in an earnings call that it missed sales expectations. It missed them enough to have 50 Freestyle Games employees laid off, and for this to be, as of now, the last Guitar Hero game released. I never thought I'd be excited to say this, but in comparison,
nice.
Rock Band 4 is just more Rock Band. Harmonix was back as developer and publisher, but the peripherals this time were made by Mad Catz. Though of course there was backwards compatibility for both peripherals and songs. In fact, the most amazing thing about this game is how well supported it's been when it comes to DLC. They are still releasing songs for this game. Just a few weeks ago, they added Nicki Minaj's Super Freaky Girl. What the hell? Critical reception was pretty high, but sales were a fraction of the third games. Mad Catz even went bankrupt, in part due to the underperformance of this game. Even though they're back from the dead now, the series would get one last chance in 2017 with Rock Band VR. It's a VR version of Rock Band. I've never played it, I can't speak to it, reviews were okay. and that was it. I will mention one last piece of Guitar Hero's legacy because that game specifically does live on in two ways. First is Clone Hero. As the title implies, it's a free clone of Guitar Hero where songs and roadmaps are uploaded by users. There are some wild things you can do in this game, and the community for it is still very strong. There's also Guitar Hero World Tour Definitive Edition, a community mod released in 2021, which continues to be updated to this day. I bring this up because one of the features of this mod is skins for the avatars that show up when you're playing. So, I don't know, this is just kind of off the top of my head, but you could have, for instance, John Wick on vocals, Walter White on bass, Saul Goodman on drums, and, I don't know, like Yellow Among Us Drip on guitar. Just an idea, just a possibility. Okay, we are actually free from Rock Band and Guitar Hero now. Like I mentioned before, there have been plenty of great rhythm games released since the genre's heyday, and I'd like to highlight some of them now. Harmonite was a 3DS game developed by the same people who make Pokemon. It's got great art design and very forgettable music, but the Pokemon tracks they throw in are great. I would say check it out if you have a 3DS, but Nintendo shut down the 3DS's eShop earlier this year, and Harmonite was digital only, so it's no longer available. Rocksmith was developed by Ubisoft and released in 2011. The pitch of this is, what if Guitar Hero actually taught you how to play guitar?
Yeah,
along with licensed songs, there were lessons that you went through using a new, slightly more advanced guitar controller, or even a real guitar. I liked the idea of this game when it came out, though I don't know how successful it was at teaching guitar to new people. If you happen to start playing guitar because of this game, please let me know. Beat Saber is a big deal. It's a VR game where you slice blocks in time with music. I'm not a huge fan of it, but as an avid glasses needer, I'm also biased against any VR game. Samba de Amigo got a reboot on the Wii back in 2008, and it's getting another entry on the Switch later this year. Speaking of another entry on Switch, I hope we get another Rhythm Heaven at some point. There was a Wii game and a 3DS game that combined new songs with old ones from throughout the series. I would say go get that one if you're interested, but here in the US, it's no longer available for the same reason as Harmonite. But as a close alternative, I'd say check out Melatonin. It's Rhythm Heaven with lo-fi beats. A lovely project, though I wish it was weirder. And I get that a direct comparison to a game like Rhythm Heaven isn't doing any favors, but in that game, you cheer a pop star on with a group of monkeys. You go on a date where you have to protect gophers from soccer balls. You shoot ghosts with arrows into a house, and when you shoot them, it goes whoa. In Melatonin, you lift weights and catch money and swipe a credit card. I don't know. I guess a more outlandish presentation would have contradicted the mellow music, so it makes sense. Still, worth a playthrough if you like Rhythm Heaven. But what about Elite Beat Agents? That hasn't seen a sequel at all, and its Japanese originator only got one sequel. Would we ever see a revival of the Osu Tatakai Wendan series? Kinda. A third of it, at least. Osu is a popular computer game where you click buttons like a goddamn lunatic.
You burned my house to the ground! My family's dead! What do I do?
This is the game for people who played the final level of EBA at the hardest difficulty and said, oh, that was easy. It's the same gameplay style as EBA, but the maps are created by users. I'd love to see Nintendo look at Osu and feel inspired to make an EBA sequel, but I also feel like they'll notice that Osu's real value is the community around it and not necessarily the gameplay. Hatsune Miku's gotten a couple of rhythm games over the years. Square Enix has made a few rhythm games out of Final Fantasies and Kingdom Hearts music. Atlus has done the same with Persona's music. Def Jam Rap Star was a 2010 rap karaoke game that dared to ask the question, what if we didn't get the rights to all the songs in our game? We may never have known if it wasn't for their sacrifice. Thumper is a rhythm horror game where you race a metal beetle down a racetrack and fight giant demonic skulls. Sayonara Wild Hearts has a beautiful art style, a bumpin' soundtrack, and Queen Latifah as narrator. Rhythm Thief on the 3DS is a fun time, an escapade through Paris with an electro-jazz soundtrack. Unlike Harmonite and Rhythm Heaven Megamix, this game was released physically, but it is basically unavailable. Friday Night Funkin'. Imagine if someone put Parappa the Rapper and D2R together, then uploaded it to Newgrounds. That's Friday Night Funkin'. I never got into it, though I know this game and its modding scene were a huge deal. The track Fresh is great.
My brother played it. Showed me that song.
Just Dance 2020 was a Just Dance game that came out in 2020. I wanted to mention this game specifically because it was the last Just Dance game to come out on the Wii. A console that was launched 14 years prior. Just Dance kept coming out on the Wii, even when its successor, the Wii U, stopped getting entries. Some said it was because hospitals used the game to help patients build up their mobility, but a Ubisoft rep debunked that as the main reason. The real reason, as they put it, was that people just wanted it on Wii. But alas, the 2020 edition was the last one for Wii. The most recent Just Dance game was the 2023 edition. Turns out this one will be the last installment. The series will become a live service from here on out, with any new songs added via DLC. Our friends at Harmonix got to reboot Amplitude in 2016. From what I heard, it was as good as the first one. Harmonix's latest game was Fuser in 2020, and it's all about performing mixes and mashups at giant festivals. I'm of two minds when it comes to this game. On one hand, it packs what is possibly the most advanced mashup software ever commercially released. For real, you can take the drums, bass, vocals, and other from any included song and mash them up with any other part of any other song. Will it sound good? Probably not, but the mere fact that the game can process that on the fly, changing key and tempo, while letting you add signal processing and other effects, is kinda nuts. On the other hand, while it amazes me as a tool, I didn't love it as a game. For one, the story progression to unlock new songs is slow. Oh my god! I imagine that was their way of nudging you to buy them with real money. Also, and this bit is more a reflection of how costly music licensing is, but I feel like this game was never able to reach its full potential. Personally, I think a game like this would be incredible for live streaming. You go on, you make mashups with your fans, you take requests from the audience. Fun time. But not only were there strict rules for how the game could be presented on stream, but only a small handful of songs could be used for a monetized stream. I wanted to show you those songs, but that's when I learned that Fuser was taken offline in late 2022, you can't buy it anymore, and Harmonix was bought by Epic Games to do Fortnite stuff. At least we have Trombone Champ. Finally, we've peaked. To round out this retrospective, I'd like to take a look at games that are not necessarily rhythm games, but rather rhythmic games, if that makes sense. Okay. Rez is a good example. It's a 2001 rail shooter, but its electronica soundtrack is woven into the very fabric of the game, which makes sense. It comes from the producer of Space Channel 5. And said producer would go on to bring that same musical synchronicity to games like Lumines and Tetris Effect. Crypt of the Necrodancer is a roguelike RPG where you move and attack in time with a song. We even got an official Legend of Zelda themed sequel in 2019, and there's a spin-off in the Of the Necrodancer series coming later this year. Metal Hellsinger is the same idea as Necrodancer, except you shoot guns in time with the rhythm. No Straight Roads is an action-adventure game about two rockers battling a city filled with EDM. The game itself is decent, but the soundtrack is phenomenal. For real, I named this as one of my favorite albums of 2020. And finally, Hi-Fi Rush came out earlier this year for Xbox and Windows, and based on reviews, it seems like a fun time. Please put this on Switch at a time that is convenient for you. And that just about covers the history of rhythm games thus far. I don't know if we'll ever see a full-on resurgence of the genre like we did in the late 2000s, but without a doubt, this genre has brought us some legit classics. Some of these games were my own gateway into music as an art form, and I hope maybe you'll check out one or two of the games that I mentioned here today. And if there's a game that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments.
It was a pretty good video. I'm gonna sell this, I don't care. I'm gonna sell this also. I'm gonna sell
this month's artist was chosen by viewers via the Deep Discog Dive decision. I'll be picking next month, but feel free to suggest artists in the comments to cover. And check out the Spotify playlist in the description. It has all the songs from this video and more. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Deep Discog Dive. Oh, hey, how's it going? I'm busy writing the first musical DDD. They say that talking about music is like dancing about architecture, so why not sing about music and build skyscrapers that can do pirouettes? Turns out that second one is a massive safety hazard, so I'll just forget about the couple million I invested in that. Today, we're talking about Pink Floyd. Let's dive in.
The video was pretty good, I liked it.
Welcome to my shop.
I think I'm done for today there. I didn't really plan playing a long time, like an hour short stream. Let's react to something else. Let's see. I like
How do you make an open
Mark Brown videos are pretty good also. Yeah, I think you get most of me here, right?
world, where the player is completely free to explore, but is also led towards key locations that will advance the story. This was the biggest challenge that Nintendo faced when making their very first open-world game, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. They wanted to give players a sense of freedom and exploration, not seen in the franchise since the very first Zelda game on NES. But they also wanted to make sure players were always making progress towards the overarching goal of saving Princess Zelda. This was no easy task to overcome. Nintendo had to go through false starts and bad playtests before finally arriving at the game we all know today. The one that made us rethink how exploration can work in an open-world game.
It's also in Elden Ring the same sort of way that they designed the world for exploration, because you have like one goal that you need to reach and then you just explore and naturally you find stuff.
And Nintendo actually shared their experience of this difficult development process at the Computer Entertainment Developers Conference in Japan back in 2017.
I remember that he showed like a prototype that looks like a Super Nintendo game, like Legend of Zelda on the NES or something.
It was a really interesting lecture and a rare act of Nintendo openly discussing the nitty-gritty details of their game design and development. But that information is sadly very hard to access today. The lecture was never uploaded. All of the reports are in Japanese, and the only English translation is a tweet thread summary that's been mangled by Twitter. And Nintendo actually got journalists to pull down their photos of the original slides. So, I thought it was time to right that wrong. To mark the imminent release of the next Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom, I decided to resurrect that old talk. I gathered different write-ups of the talk and had them translated into English. I used Internet Archives to rediscover the lost slides, and used motion graphics to make them come alive. And I used AI write-ups of the talk and had them translated into English. I used Internet Archives to rediscover the lost slides, and used motion graphics to make them come alive. And I used AI upscaling to bring back old screenshots. So, without further ado, I'm Mark Brown, this is a GMTK Mini, and here's how Nintendo solved the biggest problem in Breath of the Wild's design. Okay, so Nintendo had built a humongous world map for Hyrule and let players explore in any direction. But they needed to find some way to lure players towards key locations.
Not just to lure, also like to block the other ways in some creative way.
The initial idea was to use a system of points and lines. The points are the Sheikah Towers, those giant neon-lit spires that soar above the ground. They're clearly visible from a great distance, and they confer a great benefit to the player. They reveal a massive chunk of your map when you get to the top. So these 15 or so towers would be obvious waypoints for the player, which should effectively lead them around the map. The lines are the routes and roads between the towers, and so Nintendo could place various events along those lines. As players walked towards the towers, they would discover characters, enemy camps, and other goodies as they went. But this idea completely flopped. The guidance worked, but it actually worked too well. Playtesters felt they were stuck on a linear path and forced to follow the towers. Many complained about being trapped on an invisible but obvious guide rope, and those who deviated from the line would just get lost or find little of interest to explore. And the data bore this out. Nintendo tracked the playtesters' movements and created a heat map to see where players had explored. And they discovered that players were split into two completely different groups. About 80% dutifully followed the main route from tower to tower, and the other 20% just sorta randomly wandered around. Neither playstyle was close to what Nintendo was after. So they decided to go for a different approach. Instead of nudging players to always travel towards Sheikah Towers, they could get players to move around the map by luring them towards a larger variety of landmarks and points of interest. Things like shrines, stables, and enemy encampments. They just needed to find ways to make players gravitate towards these places like moths flapping towards a flame.
Yeah, also the towers are like very Ubisoft thing, just to have the towers.
So they first made sure that each area would confer obvious benefits. Completing shrines lets you increase your health or stamina. Enemy bases are filled with weapons to pick up. And while stables were initially just for registering horses, Nintendo made them much more attractive by adding beds for healing, a shop, and NPCs who would hand out rumors and side quests. Other areas would be worth visiting for the resources contained within. Nintendo purposefully got rid of simple healing items like hearts, so players would have to go into forests to get mushrooms or find animals to hunt. And they made rupees extremely rare, so players would need to go towards mountains and quarries to mine valuable ore, which can be sold to shopkeepers. For this plan to work, they would need to make other adjustments too. You see, the Sheikah Towers are enormous and easy to see. The smaller landmarks, less so. So Nintendo had to make them stick out from a distance or from a high-up vantage point. Shrines were given a distinctive, lit-up look. Campfires give off a tall tower of smoke. Enemy bases are often built around massive skull-shaped rocks, and the stable is a gigantic wooden statue of a horse. Also, while there's usually only one or two Sheikah Towers on screen at once, there could be dozens of other, smaller landmarks nearby, and that many options can be completely overwhelming in an open-world game. And that was partly the reason behind Nintendo creating the triangle rule. You see, Nintendo designed the terrain and landscape of Hyrule to be mostly made up of triangles. It's all hills, mountains, and rock formations that are shaped like pyramids and cones. And this has various benefits for the world design, like whenever you face a giant mountain, players get to decide whether to scale it or go around it, creating decision-making during exploration. Also, the player's eye is naturally guided to the tip of the triangle, so you can place points of interest at the peak to draw the player closer.
Yeah, it's like an arrow.
But most importantly, these triangles simply block whatever's behind, meaning that the player is rarely overwhelmed by a massive field of things to do. There's usually only a couple attractive places on screen, and the rest is hidden behind.
That's smart, to blocking some of the things that you don't see everything, so you don't get overwhelmed, so the player don't get overwhelmed. That's smart.
Hills and mountains. But as you go towards these mountains, whatever's behind is gradually revealed. Whether you climb the hill or try to move alongside it,
like natural exploration,
more terrain will start to be shown. And this has an interesting outcome. It creates a constant source of surprise and curiosity as new locations make themselves known. So you might be going towards one landmark, but as you travel there, 2 or 3 new places are revealed. Perhaps a shrine on the horizon, or an enemy camp around a corner, or a distinctive-looking rock, or a curious sight at the peak of a mountain. Wherever you go, and whatever you do, you'll be given a few new things to catch your eye and attract you. Perhaps that new landmark will distract you, and you'll ditch your old plan and go somewhere new instead. When you're finished, you'll remember where you were supposed to go and head back there, only to be distracted again. Whatever the case, this creates a chain reaction, an infinite loop of discoveries, a breadcrumb trail of landmarks, all of which makes you slowly move across the map in an addictive quest of, ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that? Ooh.
That's also true for Elden Ring, but I think actually Elden Ring does a better job at some of the things, because in Zelda, everything you find, like, the game rewards you with the same stuff every time, like Korok seeds, a shrine, like it's the same things, like enemy camp, like the same 3 things. And in Elden Ring, at least, yeah, well, some of the bosses are repetitive and everything, but at least I get like cool prizes. Well, you don't use everything because it's not fitting to your build, but you can use it, you know. You're saying to yourself, maybe I will respec and then I will use this item later and stuff. So I don't know, I think the rewards in Elden Ring are better, and yeah, they also have like pretty like a lot of surprises, and they also block a lot of your view with all those mountains and stuff. So I'm sure Miyazaki learned a lot from Zelda, and when he built the Elden Ring.
Ooh, what's that? And before you know it, you're at
like an improvement, I think.
Sheikah Tower, which is exactly where Nintendo wanted you to go in the first place. So now, with this system...
Just because the rewards are surprising, you know, you can get like a very cool weapon. And in Zelda, they all break at some point.
of attractive landmarks, players still went from point to point, but
There
this
are
time,
some cool
instead of following
swords,
a
but
specific
not
line,
like in
they were
Elden
simply
Ring.
following a breadcrumb trail of interesting landmarks, a trail that would eventually lead players to Breath of the Wild's most important locales. And where following the towers made players feel like they were being forced to travel in a specific way, the littered landmark approach was much more organic and player-driven. Players would naturally pick places to go based on their own curiosity and depending on their current goal or mood. Locations might be more or less attractive based on what you need. If you're looking to increase power, then shrines and enemy camps suddenly become much more attractive than stables and towers. Then, when night falls, other locations become more visible and appealing. So players no longer felt forced to follow a certain landmark or goal, but they still ended up where they needed to go. And Nintendo could clearly see this improvement on the heat map. There was no longer that awkward 80-20 split in the experiences. Instead, all players fell into Nintendo's vision for the game. They could see that players freely explored various places following Nintendo flow, and Nintendo could clearly see a landmark or goal and appealing. So then, when night falls, other locations become you need. Current goal or naturally pick play approach. Players feel like they were being forced to travel in a specific way. The littered landmark approach was much more organic and player-driven. Players would naturally pick places to go based on their own curiosity and depending on their current goal or mood. Locations might be more or less attractive based on what you need. If you're looking to increase power, then shrines and enemy camps suddenly become much more attractive than stables and towers. Then, when night falls, other locations become more visible and appealing. So players no longer felt forced to follow a certain landmark or goal, but they still ended up where they needed to go. And Nintendo could clearly see this improvement on the heat map. There was no longer that awkward, and Nintendo could clearly see this improvement on the heat map.
This is really spread. They're going everywhere.
There was no longer that awkward 80-20 split in the experiences. Instead, all players fell into Nintendo's vision for the game. They could see that players freely explored various places, following their curiosity from landmark to landmark, but almost all players eventually got to the key locations. And I totally found this when playing Breath of the Wild myself. I never felt particularly guided or led around the world. I was just following my own curiosity and exploring on my own terms. But I still ended up stumbling into important locations and was always making progress through the story. So this was Nintendo's first proper open-world game, and the team clearly had a lot to learn.
Yeah,
In the second half of the talk, Nintendo explained that to get a sense of scale and density, they initially used data from Google Maps to have Link run around Nintendo's hometown of Kyoto and clamber up Japan's famous Himeji Castle. And they shared how they had to make all new tools to allow for a large team to collaborate on a single map. But through clever design, driven by a desire to create a specific experience for the player, it solved the biggest problem in Breath of the Wild's design. Nintendo created an open-world game that beautifully balances guidance and exploration. A feeling of free-form adventure that I've only really seen since in Elden Ring, and almost certainly we'll see in Tears of the Kingdom. I look forward to jumping in later this week. Thanks for watching.
Great video, Mark Brown. He always has such a banger, such banger videos. Yeah, I'm gonna end this stream for today. I just wanted to keep the streak, you know. I wanna stream every day, non-stop, and every day. So you know I will be here. Okay, just GG.